Hello and welcome to Enactus On Air. I'm Mumini, the president of Enactus ESSEC. Enactus On Air is a monthly series where we spotlight change makers, innovators, and organizations that are working to create a better world. Today, we are honored to have with us Madame Puja Marwaha, the CEO of Child Rights in You, better known as CRY. With over 4 decades of impactful work, CRY has been at the forefront of advocating for child rights in India. Madame Marwaha herself has an inspiring journey from the corporate world to becoming a leading voice in social change. Madame Puja, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Momini. I'm honored.
It's my pleasure. Let's get started with our conversation. Let's start with your journey. You made a remarkable shift from the corporate sector to the social sector. What inspired you to make that change, and how did you find yourself at Cry?
Okay, two things. I think the inspiration really came when I was completing my studies. So I was doing my master's in a business subject. I was specializing in human relations and OD. And but at that time, the place where I was situated in India was in one of India's most backward districts with a very large indigenous population. And while I had lived there, I really was unaware of the inequities and the injustice that prevailed. But when I was doing my master's, the college actually brought in these subjects, and we had to study. We got exposed to actually living and going to a village where indigenous people lived. It was barely 15 kilometers from where we were, but what I think what threw me back then and till today, I can actually recall it, was just how deprived they were of anything that we saw as our normal rights as Indian citizens. Forget democratic voting. There were no roads, no schools, no hospital, no. It was almost as if they were forgotten people. And I think that moment actually, those that time set me thinking and finding out about how we were really as a country almost divided into one very privileged, English speaking, having access to all sorts of rights vis-a-vis a whole set of people. And as I dug in, I found that their numbers were really large. We're talking about 1989. This was India pre-liberalization. There was so much poverty, so much illiteracy, so much lack of education or health. And this was true for a majority of my people. And I think that was really for me a trigger to look at my life. And then I went off and I started working because obviously I needed to earn a living. And after some time, but this kept growing in my head, especially as I moved to larger and larger cities where the inequity was actually in my face. In Bombay, we lived cheek by jowl with poverty, and just the sheer, I think, indignity and injustice that I had to see every day, just, I, I think I just couldn't handle not doing something about it. So I was in my early 20s, and the thought grew, and yeah, that got into action in terms of I have to do something with my life that is different. That should make a difference to my people, to the people who have to live like this. And I must say, I started off very small, saying, oh, even if it's just one child, it's okay. But I think today, when people ask me, I say, no, no, I'm very ambitious now. I want my life to have made a difference to millions of children. Otherwise, what is the use? Um, in a country of the size of ours and with the size of our young population who, need their rights in order to be able to prosper, in order to be healthy. And Cry was such a great fit because I tried my hand at several things. But when I came to Cry, it was the first organization that asked me, what do you know how to do? And maybe we can find a way to make you do what you know how to do in the service of children. And I said, well, I know how to, make human resource systems and a human, an organizational framework. And they said, okay, go ahead, do that. So I think it was, both to do and make a difference that drove me, and the opportunity that I was afforded, in which I actually, in the first few years, was almost in a safe zone of contributing, that I knew something I knew how to do. And once that was set up, that's when I moved on to more difficult work with communities, etc. So yeah, in many ways I have been really lucky, I feel, that my life space allowed me to make these changes, and I got a lot of support from my family, my partner. Yeah, I've been very blessed, yes.
I think that's wonderful. And on this note, I really would say that I could actually relate with you. I started, getting familiar with the conditions in India maybe at the age of 10 or 12. My father led me to go into these rural areas in India where I educated whatever I learned at school to the kids, their parents, and everybody. But still, it was like early 2010, past 2010. So the
Mm.
resistance was still there. Parents were like, maybe my kid could earn a rupee or more
Yes,
than actually getting educated. And it just made me realize why we could do something better. My life in the city is so different from the people here living like in the rural areas. And I had this really big motivation, need to change as well, need to do something. And I started being a doctor. But as, like, as you said, you started off as, one kid is enough, and then I would go ahead. It's the same for me right now. Me in a business school is like one patient at a time is what I was doing as a doctor. But now if I
mm,
be, a big leader in this industry where you could cause an impact. So I think I could relate to you on that note, but you also give me the inspiration that if we set a note to do something, I think we can do really well. And you are an
absolutely.
absolutely wonderful
I think,
example of
our
it.
founder, the founder of Cry, he was Air India. He was an Air India purser. So he always loved to say, "I'm only qualified to serve cups of tea and coffee." But what a thought, right? And his thought was that every individual is a resource, is a treasure
Exactly.
house, full of resources, of motivation, and we just have to tap that. And I really see Cry's journey of 45 years as that. It's just constantly believed and made
Exactly.
possible for people to do something. Even if they're just writing a check, Momini, it is still very important. It is still more than not writing a check. Two,
Exactly.
of course, doing amazing things like starting to run a project, transforming lives in maybe your little village, or maybe 35 villages, or actually discovering a methodology that could then become policy in the country. So it is all about you and me believing that we can make a difference.
Exactly.
We don't have to be helpless victims to what we see around us.
Yeah, I thought also, the scenario in India is like, who would do it? It's only me. But also, it all starts with one step. One person comes forward, start doing a tiny thing, and, you inspire them, and a lot of people come do it together. Not everybody could be a leader, but contribution, like as we say in Indian saying, a tiny drop will still make an ocean. But we need
Yeah.
to make that first step with the right motivation.
I mean, if I just look back at the Cry journey, just Cry, one NGO, right? We've had 2 to 3 million donors.
Yes,
We have Have we have changed the lives of many children, almost 4 to 5 million children. But also, what is important is that so many people have joined and said to themselves, "My little contribution can make a difference," and that is change, right? Because that is people shrugging off this construct of, well, I can't do anything anyway, so let me not try.
And also we need people and leaders like you to take the step ahead, because there are people who cannot invest their complete time, but you are somebody who
Absolutely,
would
yeah.
inspire them to do it, and drive it forward to make it work. Now, coming back to my next question. So, looking back, are there any moments in your career at Cry that you've profoundly shaped your perspective on child rights?
Yeah. So, I have been thinking about that question um, a lot, especially maybe because at this time I'm in my late 50s, and you start actually really looking back and say, what influenced me? I think the first and very large influence has been of um, actually, we did a program evaluation. At that time, we did a lot of what we called relief work. And in that, I had the opportunity to go out and meet grassroots leaders and see people who should have had no reason to be optimistic, who had not had privileged lives themselves, and yet had not just pulled themselves up, but had begun and started and working with their communities and doing this amazing work. And when I listened to them and met them and was humbled by them, I think that was for me, has been very pivotal. This inspiration from people who make you feel like I've really done nothing in my life compared to what they've done. Imagine coming out of a Dalit family where the entire family was considered criminal, or the entire tribe was considered criminal, and still sticking to your education and still in getting yourself a degree, and then not stopping, not just getting a job and running away, but going back to ensure that more children from your community got that chance. So to me, I think that has been, I don't know if it's a moment, but it is really an experience that I've had over and over again, that has reaffirmed in a way of in my faith in just people and just human beings, of saying they are capable of the most astonishingly amazing positive things. So I think to me that's been one. I think the other have been many times, at least 2 3 times, where I've had, let's say, a certain concept of what a child needs. And then I have heard a child, I have heard a mother, and in her simple and such a direct way of putting it, I have understood what it means. For example, to have an early childhood education. So I met this young mother in Uttar Pradesh, and uneducated herself, struggling to send her son to school because he wouldn't go. And, the school was far, there was no one to motivate him. And she looked at me exasperatedly and she said, you know, imagine if there had been a preschool when he was younger. He would have got into the habit of sitting. Now I'm struggling because he's already 6 and he just wants to play. And it struck me, I said, I wish that the policy makers who don't invest money into enough money into early childhood care education would hear her, because she's telling you what it is like, right, as to why is this required, why children need to be in semi structured play and care at least from the age of 3, you know, and how that prepares them for school. So, those voices, sometimes you just hear them and they look at you and you think, she gets it. Why don't we super educated, people given this responsibility just don't hear it. We don't hear what they are saying. I think the other really strong and powerful thing that, at least in the last 10 years, I would say more, has been my strongest preoccupation is this understanding that what we really needed to work with children directly was on their agency. And this came from over and over and over again seeing the ultimate bravery and courage that young people have. When you work with them, when they discover their agency, they can move mountains. So, whether it is schools that are being revived, whether it is, I need a young girl who walks up and says, I want to play football. There is no girls' football team in the school. Let's make one. Yeah. In a really patriarchal setup where girls are not even allowed to play sport, and then has to fight for this time and space on the school football ground, for example. Too, I mean, I can give you I can't stop almost, when I think of these young girls and boys who, when they find their strength and agency. And therefore, to me, what is very important is that we have to find ways by which to focus on that it is not enough to teach them math and science and English, which we tend to focus on, or
Yeah.
literacy. Okay, they know how to sign their names, all is well. No, but how do we work with them to ensure that they build confidence in themselves, they build negotiating skills, they build communication skills? And that work we began 10 years ago, and we began it with a very and that built another belief that I have realized that has grown strong in my mind is that when we did that work, we brought in thinkers and doers. So, academics, so as to what is the theorization around what children are capable of, what are their evolving capacities, as well as beginning to do and see what we needed. So, learning from both theory and practice is a very strong thematic at CRY. That it is not enough for us to just work on the ground with children, but is enough important for us to bind it or focus it in theory or help create theory, to help create insights on what can be done. Because truly that is for policy influencing. Policy influencing is not lobbying, but is to create the thinking and to make it clear as to why children need certain things. Why it's not enough to just feed them or to stimulate them. That is not enough to, you know what I mean? So
Yes.
the whole construct of how complex change is, that it needs intersection, it needs an acknowledgement and understanding of all the systems and how many systems need to make a change if we are to make that change permanent. So yeah, I think if I were to boil it down to two or three ideas, I would really do this. I mean, I would say these three things to my mind. If we can listen to people, the people we say we serve, yeah, let them have a voice. Let children have agency and voice in what we do, in what everybody does in the name of children, as well as if we can find it in our hearts to believe that every human being has potential. They don't need to be bribed with, oh, let's use competition or let's use reward or let's use punishment, but that they are in and of themselves worthy. And all we need to do is spark that desire of to change and to do something.
That is quite inspiring and insightful, I would say. So, what we usually focus is mostly what we want to do, but I think the most important thing is what they need us to do. It's knowing the voices and their needs, not what we are capable of
We
or what
think,
we
yeah,
want to do.
because we are so
Exactly.
smart, right? We've learned it all. We know the theory,
Yeah.
you know. But we
But no,
don't
but I
know.
think that's so true. I mean, I get it. We at times we also have this a notion already. Like, we're educated, so we know what they have. They need it and there. So we know we're just going to do that and draw a box and ask everybody to fit in that. But that's not the case. And also, India has this advantage of this really good population and the younger generation at that. If we can start molding them and watering them to grow into the the beautiful flowers or trees that they are, I think that is what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to provide nourishment and give the environment, and the evolution happens by itself. And doing it at a
Absolutely.
younger age would give us the talented global citizens that India has it in itself,
Yeah.
and we could just use it for
And that
to
you
build
would
up the
actually,
country.
and you're right, that what you would actually do is construct
Exactly,
motivated individuals instead of spending all your resources in trying to reconstruct traumatized
exactly.
individuals, right?
Yeah, we started like from the root level. We always try to see what's just above, but not the root level. Building the core, which comes at a younger age, and and it just keeps multiplying because it goes. But the result that we could get and motivating in a young, very adult person is different from a child whose core values are already set.
Yeah, yeah,
And I think what you're
absolutely.
doing is wonderful.
I know. Just
So
listen to that mother. She's telling you. Just listen to her carefully. She'll tell you what her child needs.
exactly. And that is all we need to do. And we give structures, we draw agendas, but
Yes.
first thing is like
And we
listen.
should. We
We
should. But we
should.
should do it based on what we know from both practice as well as theory. Bring it, I call it praxis. Actually, where the wisdom of the doing informs the knowledge of the thinking
Yes.
and vice versa.
And we also need somebody to guide to do it, which absolutely you've been doing an amazing job at. So as a CEO, you've led Cry through over a decade of impactful work. So what strategies have you focused on to drive the organization's mission forward, as a leader to this organization?
Well, there are certain beliefs I think that I have almost imbibed. Um, some of those were through my journey. I started at very junior level in Cry, and I worked with some amazing leaders. So there were some lessons that I think I had learned. And of course, there are a whole bunch that I have learned myself. Hopefully, I've been listening and not just doing or talking. But one of the lessons I learned was that the mission was above any personal objective, right? You could not do this work if you were only looking to what was in it for you. You would have to be able to make decisions that were for the larger good. And that was very tough sometimes, right? Because you might be changing strategy completely. Because you realize that in our case, for example, we changed from relief work to rights based work. It was tough because you had to, deal with people who were saying, no, I don't want to do, I want to run my own school. And we were saying, no, we have to work with the government schools. That's big a difference as that, right? We have to make sure the government school works. I know it's longer, it's more difficult. It will take, it's not so quick, right? Vis-a-vis, you can make a really beautiful school yourself and run it, right? And then you'll have 20 perfect children. But that's not sustainable. It's not rights based, right? We have to first agree that this is children's rights, and that as citizens they get it from the system. So, reviving government schools, ensuring that they are delivering, creating the circumstances around it is different, right? And therefore, it took a lot of courage and grit to work with people. And I also learned in that process that some people would maybe never agree, but many would. So, the capacity for change was something that I observed. And I have since found, I think, in my years here, we have made many changes. We now have fundraising, other organizations which have tied up with us in America, in the UK. How do we work with them? Because they have a very different sensibility. How do we work with them to assure them that what we do here is really permanent, sustainable in nature, and is worth investing into, right? How do we convince the world that India's children, by sheer numbers, are the future of the globe? We don't get as much attention as in Africa. Maybe people don't carry as much guilt about us, but we have a lot of children, and if they don't meet their potential, to my mind, the world doesn't meet its potential, right? We're talking 350 million children. It is a huge, huge number as a percentage, right? When we have malnourishment, when we say one in, underage, under five, 1 in 5 children is malnourished, the numbers equal sub-Saharan Africa, right? And therefore, I think that has been something which is how do we tell the stories and tell them better. Yeah. Um, I think the focus on agency, as realizing that when we worked with government systems, we work with parents, we work with larger society, but what do we do with the children themselves? What is the change that will be permanent? And as I was saying earlier, my belief that it was our work with agency. So whether the project may be working on nutrition or focusing on education or child labor or child marriage or trafficking, but in every project, the heart of the work is the work with the children's groups in ensuring that they are learning life skills, they are negotiating, and so on. So that has been a big, I think, I feel something very proud of, and I hope something that is a belief that only grows within the larger world and the everyone who works with children. That you can't just treat them as things you want to act upon, but if you treat them and you understand that they are people with rights and entitlements, then they have to have agency. Because I keep thinking, if I was not taught to have agency when I was 8 years old, even when I am 30, and I have, let's say, I have the bad luck to have an abusive person in my life, all I will see, if I had been taught to, you must listen to all adults, all I will see as a 30-year-old is an adult I must listen to. you know so it's as fundamental as that, as telling young people that you have worth, you are an individual worth shaping and becoming something in this life. Yeah. The other learning that we've had, and I believe very strongly in it, was this question we asked ourselves on who are we accountable to. So, how do you build accountability in an organization? How do you build accountability not just because a donor needs a report, but how do you build accountability because aren't we self declared champions of children? Children didn't ask us
Yeah.
to be their champions. We declared ourselves, right? We go out in the world and ask people to give us money, resources for children. So we are so accountable to those children in everything that we do. We are accountable to be efficient. We are accountable to be cost efficient. We are accountable to be moral, to be just, to ensure children's dignity. We are accountable to not do our work with a lack of integrity, even if it means at that point not getting some support you could have got, not taking a shortcut you can take. Yeah, so that I think in order to resist that, you have to keep coming back to core accountability for children. And so what happened? How did that work out? In the organization, we built software systems to track each child's progress. So, though we work with 500,000 children, we track each child, we track their families. So, we know exactly what is, and we track them on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis. Obviously, there are different sets of data indicators, but they are based on us saying if these are the stakeholders we work with, and these are the indicators of change. They could be process, and there is a lot of pushback on this, right? Because sometimes it is frustrating to say, no, 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 we are not running a we are not running a machine factory, right? we
Yes.
we can't have measurement of everything. But I really do believe that you need to know whether you're on the right path, right? So what is a process indicator? It may be completely qualitative. It may be that I walk into a project and I can see happier children. But how do I narrate that? How do I capture it? I think it is our responsibility to measure impact, not because our donors told us to, not because it's the fashionable thing to do, but because we owe it to children. And so, as even as an organization, I do get things from people saying, "Pooja, you're very obsessed with ensuring there are monthly reviews, ensuring everybody's involved." So that brings me to another belief that I hope that I have you know brought into the institutional framework, which is that accountability is built only if everybody has a voice. It is the child who has a voice, but in how you structure what you do. I mean, could I write a monthly review myself of the organization? Maybe I could. I don't have to involve everybody. But what good will that do to everyone? Does it build anybody's skills? Does it build observation? Does it build? No, it doesn't, right?
Yeah, not at
So
all.
every quarter, half year, the whole organization sits down and reviews piece by piece by piece. Is it longer? Yes, because I really believe building democracies and participation takes time.
Yeah.
It takes energy. You should be willing to hear everyone's voice. You should be willing to hear voices that say, no, I face this challenge. I could not do this. Or I'm tired. I'm exhausted. You've made me do too much. You know. So actually building in systems that ensure that your ears are open. And before I go on and on, I think I'm going back again and again to saying that if the organization, Christ says that we want to build a society where there are happy, healthy, and creative children, but we also need to build the society in which they are centered so that all decision making is centered around children. And when we do that, we make a fundamental statement actually that we believe in every human being. Every adult is capable of change and action. And I will not write you off. I will not make you an enemy. And that often it can be debatable because, somebody may be harming children through inaction, or they may be a corporate or whatever. But therefore, if you look at CRI's variety of supporters, it will have everybody. Nobody is written off. I will try and work with you. I will ensure that is there something that you can do and bring to the table? How can we have those conversations? So I think that fundamental belief in that people are good, and what we need to do is evoke that and harness it, I think is something that's again fundamental. So when we built reward systems, we built them on the basis of justice and equity. We do not believe that by creating competition on salaries or incentives, people will do more. They won't. They probably actually turn around and do less. They probably tell you, do you think I can be bought off? So I am terribly proud that I think that is something that we have been able to do because it is fighting against the current moment. To be honest, right?
Yeah.
Um, um, because the current tells you that no, no, human beings are selfish, and unless you reward them all the time, they will not work. I don't believe that to be true, and I don't see that in my organization. And believe me, I mean, I've seen some of the most outstanding professionals in their own fields in my organization. I've seen them contribute, I've seen them come, flower. Yeah, some leave, but I think the ones who leave are the ones whose values don't match, which is fine. It's okay. But the gifts that we have got from the most extraordinary people in the last 30 years, yeah, I love to sit and count them, but I can't. It's just feel very blessed.
I think
And I
that's
think,
wonderful.
and I think just to be able to see the change in children, to see them, yet till yesterday not believing in themselves, and now being able to speak and to say, I want to be a basketball player at India level. We have this project where football has been used to transform the lives of urban children. And there are kids there who are today being, sold off in auctions, and, going into the Indian football team and into these. It is so inspiring. So, more than anything else, I think that is the shot of oxygen that you need, to be able to see them and to tell their stories is a privilege.
That's really wonderful and inspiring as well. And it for like in a company or in anything, we always focus on this quantitative data or numbers. We got this, we got that, we made these many billions and all. But as you said, measuring impact is really challenging. But the output that you get out of it is, it fulfills your soul and the major purpose that you're actually working for, and gives you,
Exactly.
the result is all that you need, where you motivate yourself doing it, and also the fulfillment that you get out of it.
And you know
And
whether what you're doing is working or not. You
exactly.
know, we have to be able to look at that impact. The data gives us that mirror. This is working, this is not working. Oh my God. We have to look for something else. There's something we've not caught here. In a
Yeah.
country as unbearably complex as India, just because something worked somewhere doesn't mean that it will work in another community. And you really have to, if you don't monitor it, you cannot apply it. I mean, I keep thinking you cannot even reach generalities. They will
Yeah.
just not work.
Yes, I truly agree with you. It's not just monitoring, but also getting constant feedback on what we're doing is, a key driver for what we're going to do and what ways we can improve our ways and methods
Yeah, yeah,
to do that. And I truly agree with you. And also when you were talking about, being the leader, it's not just your job to do the entire task, but make sure that everybody in your team does it. It's the same situation at Enactus as well. If we have a project, it's not me just doing everything, but we have designated roles, but also everybody comes together, and it's a teamwork that actually brings more diversity and more impact on different ideas that we bring to the table and
yeah,
different
yeah.
minds that work together. And I think from what I see about Cry, I think you've been doing a great job and an inspiring one at that. But I also would believe that doing all of it might have not come easy to you. There might have been challenges in at organization level, or even at talking or motivating the parents, to get their kids educated, or kids themselves to be, you know, be literate or train themselves into skills that they could be good at. So how what are those challenges that you faced? How was the condition when you like a decade ago, and what is the situation right now, and how did you handle those challenges?
So there are two questions here, really. Some are in the space of the institution and the organization itself. And obviously the far more important one is what we see in the field, what we face in the field. So I think one of the big challenges that we face in the field is when a new issue emerges. right? So for example, about 15 years ago in India, we found, or in our work at the field, um, one of our maxims has been to go to those places where nobody else goes, right? Find communities who are really out of the limelight, are not getting any entitlements, and so on. So, there, what we started seeing emerging, for example, was malnutrition. And we were very surprised because we always seen ourselves as a country of farmers, or even our indigenous people, in fact, were much healthier because they were able to live in the forests, live closer to nature, which we know with all the science that is actually much better. But we started seeing emerging malnutrition, and therefore we had to find new strategies to work it out and figure out why is it happening, what is happening, what could fix it, and then work on, and then realize that, oh, we had all thought that having a public distribution system would be a miraculous thing, but it was not, because it only had cereal, it only had carbohydrates. I mean, that's what we realized later, right? So we all
Yeah.
thought, oh, India's not hungry anymore. India's not hungry anymore, but children need a far more complex and rich diet. And communities were sort of, leaving aside what they saw as the less prosperous millets or seeds or grains that they were using, or smaller animals. So that challenge came from people becoming more religious and suddenly thinking they need to be vegetarian, and a myriad issues. And then when we started finding the solutions, they were not just sitting in a medical legal kind of interventions, but they were also sitting at community habit interventions, right? And it's very hard to work with communities when those communities already live in so much poverty, right? And you don't want to blame them, right? Because, in many ways, the mother who goes to work in the city, we're seeing malnutrition in cities. Why? Because their mothers get domestic work. So they leave the home without cooking anything for them, for the children. And, they're given a little bit of money and they buy some fast food or snacks. So, all sorts of interesting sort of challenges which had to be, and then, addressed community by community in different ways. So, there are, as I say, that there's a new child rights challenge that we didn't know about. In 2020, the India had internet penetration of 50% or so, but because of COVID, was brought up to 100%. Everybody jumped on we must e-educate the children, and forgot that trafficking would go up, that children would get addicted to gaming, that cyber security would suddenly become. So, as I said, the impact and the emergence of new issues and new challenges, and the need to constantly be on the ball to reinvent, and sometimes we think, oh, we've done this, this is how education works, we've got it all done, and then suddenly it's all out of the window because there's a new challenge. How do you
Yes.
work with that? How do you, and I don't want to dwell on COVID because that was an extreme challenge for the whole world. But yeah, the different circumstances have given rise to different challenges. As this country has got more connected, as it's got more industrialized, more communities are being uprooted. They don't know how to deal with new lives in cities. We have more and more migrants. So, what happens to their children? So, there have been systems created for them back in the village. They have school access, they have, early childhood care access. There's a medical schedule, they're being immunized. And now suddenly they're not there at all because their parents had to move because of economic distress. And therefore, climate, the latest problem which we are all facing, which is that so many of our
Yeah.
areas are disaster prone. We laugh about this project where one of the strategies we use for countering malnutrition is encouraging people to have kitchen gardens. But what do you do when there are mass floods every year? Overnight, that entire effort is gone. And now suddenly, families have moved away. How do you get them back? How do you get schools up and running? So yeah, it's this, I think, this dynamic nature of changing challenges, you know, uh, which maybe 20 years ago we didn't expect. We thought, oh, we got education as a right, all would be well. Or, all of us love to think, okay, this silver bullet will work, right? But it doesn't. The Western nations children may not be starving, but are still malnourished. They are facing
Yes,
obesity. They are facing abuse. Yeah, protection issues have not gone away. What I think the reality of the West tells us is that just because poverty has gone away in its most extreme forms doesn't mean child abuse has gone away. And to have
that is
to
so true.
swallow that and then find the wherewithal to work with it is to me a new challenge every day. If I come to the organization, yeah, I mean, we nearly shut down a couple of times, so that's a big challenge.
Oh,
Some form of fundraising failed, so we had to find something new. Some strategy that we put on the ground with children was not working. We had to completely transform and change ourselves. It was almost like, at least three times in my tenure, it's been like the river's going to the sea, and now you have to pick it up and take it back to the source. But what really amazes me is just the resilience and the steel of people to be able to do that. And someone said this to me some time back, and it really stayed with me. He said, other organizations, when they change strategy, they just change all their people, they change all their partners, the NGOs, who smaller organizations, and they say, oh, we need new skills, and you are out of the window. But cry carries you along. The attempt is to reskill and change and transform. Yes, it will take a little more time, but that's the way to do it. It's not to just drop people and run off and say, oh, we've had this bright new idea. We have to do that because we have to change ourselves, but we don't have to necessarily do it by leaving everyone behind. So
true.
I think, to me, that has been the great learning. But yeah, there have been a couple of times where I would have much rather crawled under the bed when I got up in the morning and not have to go to work and confront the fact that I don't have money for, the work that we do. Yeah.
That must have been quite challenging. But what's truly inspiring is, I think, every time we fall back, we get up, bounce back to what we want to do, and we just keep going.
Yeah,
And as I would
absolutely.
always motivate myself, it's like you don't know what the destination would be at the end. You know the figure, but take one step at a time, one day at a time, and you will go there. Not everything needs to be figured out, but at least we need to start with something to envision what we want to do. And I think your experience truly proves that
Yeah.
resilience is something
And through this,
everyone have to have.
it just struck me to tell you one thing that, it just struck me as I was talking, was that one of my biggest lessons through all of this was that actually you know the answers. The wisdom, the knowledge, the steel is within you. And at that time, sometimes we get so um, overwhelmed that we feel, oh,
Yes,
some great expert will come and tell us what to do. Somebody out there must be knowing what to do. And we run here and there like idiots. And in the end, uh, actually, I know it's counterintuitive, but what you need to do is actually go inside yourself at
yes.
that point, as an organization, as an institution, and you will find that the resources are there. You knew the answers. And you were the only people who can carry them out because they're your own, right?
Yeah.
The answer does not lie with these fancy looking, you know, experts and counselor, whatever, consultants, and so on and so forth, which I think sometimes we clutch at. But I think for people and human beings and leaderships to believe in themselves, say we know actually what to do. We may need a particular technical skill that we may not have, but that we know, to know that we need it, we know,
Yes.
you know.
I couldn't agree more with you. I think it's something even I've experienced. We sometimes think that, there's somebody, a know-it-all around us, and we underestimate what we are capable of
Yes,
when
yes,
we are, struck with something. But all we need to do is take a deep breath, sit and analyze the situation, and we will figure it out in the end. It's just it takes a bit of a time and a clarity, but it's
yeah.
as you said, it's there within us.
I remember we went through a really tough year once, and we really thought we didn't have money. Everything was getting delayed, etc. It was a really hard year for everybody. And in the end, we had to sit down and together, 200 of us, had to talk about it, weep about it, laugh about it. We wept, we felt terrible, we realized, and in that weeping and realizing, we realized what all we'd done and how we'd emerged and how proud we were of the fact that we didn't pretend that everything was all right. We didn't. We acknowledged it, we put it on the table, and we got ahead and we fixed it together.
That is true. I think it's exactly right. It's not just one person, but it's everybody coming together to make it work. And not one person would have all the answers together, but like one could have a technical knowledge, one could have an insight from their expertise,
Yeah,
all come together,
exactly.
and that's how it's done.
I sometimes think,
That
one
brings
of the greatest advantages of CRI is that we've always been a poor organization. We've always raised the money ourselves. We've never been flush with funds. I think it's really good for us because we're always looking for out of the box cheap solutions. We've got to do, and it does hasn't affected our ambition in any way. I'm going to do the biggest campaign, but I have no money for it. Now find a way, and people
uh,
they find ways.
yes, I think that's really interesting as well. We have certain ways figured out, but once we throw ourselves into that challenging times, I mean, for me at least, I really work way better under pressure, or when there's like something and a limited amount of time and I have to figure something out. It's it really pushes our potential, and an undiscovered potential sometimes unleashes, and it
Yes,
does wonderful things.
absolutely. I always remember this one little example of this young girl in communications, and we were wanting to do a installation on, I can't recall what it was. Maybe it was protection, maybe it was child labor, whatever it was. And we were racking our brains because she had no money. She was racking her brains because she had no money. And I kind of told her, you have no money to do it. You just have to do it. And she said I was home and her son was about a year old and he was playing with his blocks. And then she looked at those blocks and she said, oh, look at that. When you build with the blocks, you can make a really big, effective, impactful structure. She came to office running the next morning, called administration and said, how many empty boxes do we have? Packing boxes. And so we found these old empty packing boxes. By the time we came into office, she had them up. She'd fixed them, she turned them into this beautiful installation, which was so light and easy to carry from location to location,
Wow.
and no money except what I may have taken to do the printing or the coloring. And it was just brilliant, and I don't think she would have even challenged herself if I told her, okay, you've got you
Yes.
have 2 lakhs, I have 200,000 rupees, and you can go and get a agency. And then you would have said, oh, the agency's ideas are not good enough. But here
Yeah.
they were, this group of little designers, and who just, they constantly surprise me every day.
I think it's exactly right. Sometimes it could be, I don't know how to say, but like sometimes my mom says it, you don't learn swimming, but like, let me just throw you into the pool. You would figure it out somehow, but you would ultimately do. And I think it's kind of shares a similar side over that. But also, I think there's also really nice potential in young talents and innovators way ahead in the future. So that brings to my next question. What's your vision for the future of Cry, and how do you see the organization evolving to meet new challenges and opportunities?
I don't want to see Cry grow into a huge, large organization with 20 times the money. It would be nice to have more money, but what I want for us to do is to find more and more ways to influence more and more children's lives, right? That is important. The scale of what you do, not by duplicating everything as is, right? But by plucking out ideas, being, let's say, a knowledge bank, saying, I will train you in, how do you build an institution? How do you, because we built what? 800 small, Cry was an angel funder, to give you context, to people who just had ideas. Many times they were just a fellow, just a young individual who said, I need money to run my home while I try out this idea. And we were like, take the money. Yeah. And because of that, we had to build the skills of building those institutions and those people to say, you know what? There are these statutory compliances. You'll have to write books of accounts. You will have to build second line leaderships. You will have to build an NGO so that it is sustainable on its own. You will have to find other sources of funds. You will have to look at your work like this. So if that's our strength, then how do we take that to larger and larger spaces? How can we affect, or these wonderful things that we've experimented with, tried, succeeded, how can we take them out? I always think some of our greatest successes are those where simple things, simple policy tweaks can suddenly influence 100,000 children whom I could never do directly, right? I mean, I could say that, oh, I want Cry to become like the World Bank or BRAC, I mean, in Bangladesh. But I don't. I think that our job is not to do that. Our job is to be influential and to make our ideas and what we know is good for children become spread, actually go all over. And I think our job will be done on the day that an ordinary Indian citizen will turn around and be able to argue for children staying in school in spite of poverty and not be okay with, having children serving us and working. And that is the change that we all need to look at. How do we change our whole attitude to children to ensure that they are sitting at the center? If I have 100 rupees as a family, how can I privilege children in that choice making? Because I brought them to the world. They didn't ask to be born. I am the duty bearer. Yeah. And as a society, we are duty bearers. And you can give all these excuses of, oh, how will India grow to be a great nation? Forget that. Just the fact that you are responsible. We are responsible for our children and what happens to them. And if the next generation grows up bowed and malnourished and not educated, then it is our bad. It is not theirs. So yeah, I think for me that is really what I would love for Cry. Of course, I would love to have $100,000, whatever, but to do what? To create the thinking, the change, the models of what kind of policy could work, like which kind of Like I remember we put a lot of money and effort into building a very revolutionary concept at that time, which is how do you get children totally out of labor? And there's this concept of the Brit School, right, which was built by our partner, a lady named Shanta Sinha. And she said, I'll just take the children away for a summer school and the parents to experience what it's like for children to be happy and in school. And it led to momentous change. And so that was fine. Momentous change in one district. But that idea was then taken into national policy. And Brit schools were built all over the country. Now that is change. That is influence. That is what you want to do. You want to be able to say, oh, we can take this and roll with it all over. So for me, that is really what I would love for Cry to be.
That is truly inspiring. Usually I hear saying everyone wants to, further the organization or, make it really larger. But, the talk of actually having different ways to do, the impact is something really wonderful and insightful, I would say. And it's quite motivating for me. And there are so many aspiring entrepreneurs like me. So, and they are in the audience as well. So, what advice would you give them about building initiatives that create meaningful change, maybe perhaps particularly in child rights?
I would say, I would say much the same that I've said, I think, through the interview. One, know your problem. Yeah. So, what is the problem? You're sharpen it. Like, know what you are setting out to achieve. A. B. Understand there is no silver bullet. There is not going to be one miraculous thing that everybody will drink and we will all be okay. Yeah, there is no such thing. People can tell you that, oh, I discovered that if you children knew maths and English, they would do fine. No, it's not true. Trauma would hit them. They could have been, they could be trafficked. They could be, right? Many things will happen, can
Yes.
happen. Yeah. So the complexity of change and the need for complex solutions, and therefore, what you need to build as entrepreneurs is resilience. It is the ability to roll with failure as much as the ability to celebrate and celebrate every little success. If I look back at my life and I think if there was one thing I would have done differently, it would have been to celebrate the small successes even more, and not just say, oh, yes, okay, this is fine, but we've got so much more to do, right? Which we tend to do as social workers, social entrepreneurs, social, right? Because we're always looking at that child whom we couldn't rescue. We don't look at the one we rescued. Yeah? So I think learn to celebrate and learn to build that resilience to saying it will fail because sometimes what will happen will be very, very complex. It will be very, it was something I could have not predicted,
Yeah.
right? So I think having that is two very important things. The other thing I think, the third thing I would say is look at different ideas on scale. You don't have to become a behemoth. You can become a behemoth idea giver. I
Yeah.
can see organizations who are okay. I've done my work with my base 20,000 children. Can I take this to curriculum? Can I help a state government to build a better curriculum using the learnings from my work? So I don't have to reach those 200,000 children directly, but I can help by building the capacities, the resources. I think it is our responsibility to document and track and make our learnings and wisdom available. The problem sometimes with us is that We become competitive because grants are
Yes.
competitive, funding is competitive, and there is a need for us to keep our, wisdom to ourselves, right? I see us doing it. Saying, oh, and we're not going to tell you what we do in our life skills curriculum because you'll just copy it. But what I've realized is that every copier just expands the market. And what is that market? That market is change in children. So it's a positive thing, right? So if I remember we started off our first 20 years, we did India's first charity cards. Yeah. And we had huge sales, we had the most cutting edge design. And then everybody copied it. And so our market died. But it doesn't matter, right? Imagine the number of more people who learned that they could do charity by simply buying a card, right? That's what we should focus on, right? The number of people who've told me that, oh, we didn't know children have rights until you guys told us. Now, this person may have never given me money or may never start an NGO or whatever, but it doesn't matter. At least they now are thinking that children have rights, that they are not just, little creatures to be molded as I want them to be. So I think as social entrepreneurs, do that. Also, please understand there's a science to building organizations. Do not ignore that science. Yeah. It is only a strong organization that can do great work. We make this mistake in our sector of focusing so much on the work, putting all our resources that we forget about our own selves, our health. And I don't mean by give ourselves better salaries, but actually focus on what is the health of the organization. Are you statutory compliant? Are you writing your accounts well? Are you structuring people's jobs? Are they clear about what they have to do? Do they feel fulfilled at the end of the day? Have you built a great brand? Please. Sometimes we get so carried away with our work that we forget to build credibility for the work. This is a typical social entrepreneur thing. People
Yeah.
stare at me blankly when I say that in CRY we have, out of our 200 people, we have like 15 people who work on the brand and work on media. Say, why? I say, why not?
Yes.
You know, if people know me, they will trust me with their money,
True.
with their time, with their skills. I have 10,000 volunteers. I don't have 10,000 volunteers by accident. I am making a push to get them meaningful work to do, right? To talk about that work, to sort of tell them that you're going to be a changed human being if you volunteer, and that's a fact, right? But how many people know that fact? They don't. So it's your job not just to do what you set out to do, but to also build whatever size of organization you want to build. It could be 10, 20, 200. I mean, CRY's been 200 people since I joined it. We've never really grown the organization a lot. So to do that, we had to say there are certain things that are not our core expertise. These should be done by partners, not by us.
Yeah.
So you have to let go that thing of I want to do everything myself. Think about your organizational structure. What works for you? Like we have a matrix structure. We have a lot of leaders, actually, which personally we feel is very stable because you can pluck one person out, and so there's no heroing.
Yeah.
It's very dangerous to grow a heroic organization where one person is like the hero. What happens to the organization without that hero?
Yes.
Especially in
That is so
founder
true.
based organizations, it can be very dangerous, right? So the answer is not to, a lot of founders tell me, oh, that means I have to find a successor, I have to step out. No, that's not the answer. It may not be. The organization probably still needs you and your energy and your vision. But how do you find and recruit like our founder did, right? He died in 94. I was only 15 years old. I joined the organization. You couldn't tell that there was no founder anymore. It was tickety boo. It was working. People had been inspired to do their jobs and carry on the organization, right? I'm the fourth CEO. There is now a sixth group of leaders ready, So I'm saying build for the future. Build.
True.
Don't just get so obsessed with I have to get everything outside right that I will not focus on my own health. Yeah, so
That is
lots of gyan.
no, but I really love talking about it. And also, I think from what you've said, the major lesson that I could take is we don't just build a person or just build, a successor, but actually we build a system that could run by itself and could inspire and irrespective of the components of it, a
Yeah.
system strong enough would sustain by itself. And
We
that is what we
spent
need to take
we
into
have spent
consideration.
years focusing on discovering what our base values were and then
Yes,
creating systems that walk those values. Because again, if you don't do that, then it's everyone's confused, right? Then
yes,
even a shortcut's okay. If I don't have a moral compass to value it, to weigh it against, right? So Christ is, we call it the Jedi: justice, equality, dignity, and integrity. And if your action does not seem to be in consonance, believe me, it's probably wrong. We have taken those decisions sometimes say for a short period of time, let's pay this person more because we need those skills. Believe me, we've regretted it. It has never done us good. To break a
I think
principle does not work.
I think at the end of the day, irrespective of which sector or industry it is, I think it also comes down to our core values and ethics that we truly follow that actually makes us the humans that we are. And
Yeah.
it is very important to do that. And so before I wrap up, that's a signature question of the A that we ask everyone that comes to an Actors on Air. So I think I would know the answer for you, but I would still ask it. So if you have unlimited amount of money that grows as you spend it, what is that one specific problem in the world that you would like to solve?
Children. I would like to solve, yeah, just to ensure that children have education and health, and that what that education has is towards building their agency, and I would throw that money at anything that would help with that. I mean, I'm always dreaming about if I had more money for this program, we'd put in theater, we'd put in play, we'd put in drama, we'd put in even the science of what children need. Like, do they need exposure to STEM? Do we need more gender work to ensure that girls are, feel that they have a future and not just condemned to uh, homes for the rest of their lives? Yeah. So yes, I think if I had that money, that's something I would love to do, and I would spend part of the money on telling people so, on getting the message out there, in changing people's minds and hearts about what they should be doing for children. Sometimes I look at the kind of money there is in, for example, advertising a consumer good. And I think, look at the brains and the effort and the time people put in to encourage people to drink Coca Cola. Can you imagine if we had that kind of money and energy and brains that we could pay for to get people to say, this is why children need to be educated, or persuade them that they should not be hitting their children, that corporal violence is wrong. So the science that gets developed for unfortunately very different objectives, which are required in the world, I suppose. But imagine if we could afford that science to towards good. That would be woo.
Truly, I think there would be no bounds to my imagination on what we could have done with it.
Yes, yes.
That's so wonderful knowing that. So thank you, Madam Puja, for sharing such valuable insights and inspiring stories with us. It's been a privilege to hear about your journey and Christ's remarkable impact. At Enactus Effect as well, we believe in power of collective action, and your work exemplifies how collaboration can lead to transformational change. Before we
Absolutely.
wrap up, is there a message you'd like to leave with not just entrepreneurs, but whoever would come to this video and watch it, to the entire population around the globe? What is that message you would like to share?
I would like to say to them, children are special. They are special because they are especially vulnerable. They are dependent on you as adults, and we need, as a world, to fulfill our duty to them, to ensure that they are not victims of war, of hunger, of issues that are so created by human beings, and that we must protect them and um, invest into them a large part of our resources as a world, as societies, as countries. Um, I wish for each of you to just go out there and say, this will be the issue I will vote on. How, what is your plan for children? How are you going to change and transform their lives and walk on that path, each one of us as a citizen of planet Earth? Because if we do that, then our children will become the happy, healthy, creative individuals we want them to be.
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you once again for being with us. And we look forward to seeing Christ's continued success. For our
Thank
viewers,
you,
if this
Bhavani.
conversation inspired you, and I'm sure it did, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Enactus Effect for more inspiring stories of impact. Together, let's work towards a better world. Until next time, stay curious, stay motivated, and keep making a difference. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure.
It was wonderful talking to you. I can't even tell you how much privileged and honored I feel to listen
Oh,
to all your journey. And it just gives me more energy to make my goals, but for the world to go forward.
I'm sure
And
you'll be there.
yes, thank you so much.